September 1943. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly, its dark waters hiding a revolution that would starve an empire. Below the surface, Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey adjusts his periscope aboard the USS Harder, watching a Japanese convoy approach. The smell of diesel fuel and sweat fills the cramped submarine as his crew prepares to fire. What they don't know is that they're about to unleash the most devastating maritime campaign in history. While Japan's admirals planned glorious naval battles, American submarines were quietly hunting their merchant fleet like wolves stalking sheep. In shipyards across America, workers like riveter Elizabeth Harris assembled the steel predators that would sink over 5 million tons of Japanese cargo. Captain Masashi Fujimori commanded merchant vessels desperately trying to feed Japan's war machine, but the ocean itself seemed to turn against them. This isn't just the story of submarine warfare, it's the story of how American industrial might crush an empire's dreams. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The cold Pacific water pressed against the USS Harder's hull like a living thing. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey pressed his eye to the periscope, watching the Japanese convoy lumber across the horizon. The submarine's diesel engines hummed beneath his feet, while 24 men held their breath in the cramped control room. Salt spray had long ago mixed with sweat and oil to create the submarine's distinctive smell, a mixture that would haunt these men's dreams for decades. Range, 1,800 yards, whispered sonarman Third Class Robert Palmer, his headphones pressed tight against his ears. The Japanese freighter Nisho Maru cut through the waves, her cargo holds packed with aviation fuel desperately needed by Japanese fighter squadrons in the Philippines. Behind her, 2 escort destroyers scanned the water with growing nervousness. Dealey calculated the intercept course with mechanical precision. The Harder carried 24 Mark-the-Same torpedoes, each one costing $8,000, more than most Americans earned in 2 years. But these weapons represented something far more valuable than money. They embodied American industrial superiority translated into underwater warfare. The torpedo room reeked of petroleum and metal polish. Torpedo Man First Class. James Martinez ran his hands along the gleaming cylinder of torpedo number 7, checking the warhead one final time. This particular torpedo contained 643 pounds of Torpex explosive, enough destructive power to crack a cruiser's spine. Behind the warhead sat a steam turbine engine that would drive the weapon through the water at 46 knots. Faster than any Japanese destroyer could maneuver. "Fire one!" Dealey commanded. The submarine shuddered as compressed air expelled the torpedo from tube number 1. Martinez felt the deck plates vibrate beneath his boots as the weapon armed itself and began its deadly run toward the convoy. Through the hull, they could hear the torpedo's propeller spinning up to attack speed. 43 seconds later, the Nisho Maru disappeared in a column of fire and steam. The explosion sent shock waves through the water that rattled the Harder's instruments and knocked Seaman Second Class William Torres against the navigation table. 8,000 tons of aviation fuel ignited simultaneously, creating a fireball visible from 20 miles away. "Target destroyed," reported Palmer, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "Escort vessels converging on our position." Dealey ordered emergency dive procedures. The Harder slipped beneath the waves like a steel shark, leaving behind only bubbles and the burning remains of Japan's fuel supply. As they descended toward 300 feet, Chief Petty Officer Frank Sullivan calculated their achievement. That single torpedo strike had eliminated enough aviation fuel to keep 50 Japanese fighter planes airborne for 1 month. 3,000 miles away, Elizabeth Harris wiped welding slag from her safety goggles and stepped back to admire her work. The torpedo tube assembly for submarine number SS-297 gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of San Pedro shipyard. Around her, 800 workers labored through the night shift, each one contributing to America's underwater arsenal. The shipyard never slept. Welding torches cast dancing shadows across the massive submarine hulls, while overhead cranes moved steel plates weighing 12 tons each. Harris supervised 17 welders working on the forward torpedo room, ensuring that every joint met Navy specifications for depth charges and pressure resistance. Another boat finished means another boat hunting Japanese shipping, Harris told her assistant supervisor, Margaret Chen, as they watched the completed submarine slide down the Ka, launching ways toward San Pedro Bay. The USS Barb displaced 2,400 tons fully loaded and carried enough firepower to sink an entire Japanese convoy, Harris checked her production logbook. San Pedro shipyard had delivered 12 submarines in October 1943, each one costing $4 million to build. But those numbers paled beside the broader statistics. American shipyards from Maine to California were launching 2 submarines every 3 days, a production rate that Japanese intelligence officers refused to believe even when presented with photographic evidence. The welding shop floor stretched for 600 yards, filled with the controlled chaos of wartime production. Harris watched as her crew installed the final torpedo tube in another submarine's forward compartment. These weapons would carry American-made Mark 13th torpedoes across thousands of miles of ocean to strike at the heart of Japan's empire. Each submarine required 16,000 individual parts manufactured in 47 states. The periscope came from optical factories in Rochester, New York. The diesel engines arrived from locomotive works in Pennsylvania. The steel hull plates began as iron ore from Minnesota's Mesabi Range, transformed in Pittsburgh's blast furnaces into hardened steel capable of withstanding 500 pounds per square inch of water pressure. Harris climbed aboard the nearly completed USS Tang for final inspection. The submarine's interior smell reminded her of her father's machine shop, cutting oil, fresh paint, and the metallic bite of new steel. But this machine would travel further than any tool her father ever built. The Tang would patrol Japanese-controlled waters from the Aleutian Islands to the Java Sea, hunting merchant vessels that carried Japan's industrial lifeblood. The torpedo room impressed her most. 6 tubes forward, 4 aft, each one capable of firing a torpedo every 20 seconds during combat. Harris calculated the destructive potential. 10 submarines operating simultaneously could sink 100 Japanese vessels in a single coordinated attack. America was building submarines faster than Japan could replace the ships they sank. As midnight approached, Harris reviewed the night's accomplishments. Her crew had completed 3 torpedo room assemblies, installed 47 periscope mechanisms, and welded 8 miles of interior piping. Tomorrow would bring similar achievements, repeated in shipyards across America. Captain Masashi Fujimori stood on the bridge of the Tama Maru, watching storm clouds gather over the South China Sea. His cargo manifest showed 8,000 tons of rice, ammunition, and medical supplies bound for Japanese forces in the Philippines. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate reports from other merchant captains. American submarine contact bearing 270 degrees, reported Communication Officer Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto, his voice tight with concern. The 3rd submarine sighting in 4 hours meant the convoy faced coordinated attack from multiple enemy vessels. Fujimori adjusted his binoculars and scanned the horizon. The Tama Maru carried critical supplies for General Yamashita's forces defending Luzon, but getting those supplies to their destination required running a gauntlet of American submarines that seemed to multiply each month. The destroyer escort IJN Shikanami positioned herself between the convoy and the suspected submarine contact. Captain Fujimori watched the warship's depth charges explode in neat rows, sending geysers of water 200 feet into the air. But these attacks rarely succeeded. American submarines dove deeper and moved faster than Japanese anti-submarine warfare tactics could counter. Fujimori studied his charts, calculating the convoy's position relative to known submarine patrol areas. American intelligence seemed remarkably accurate about Japanese shipping schedules and routes. Somehow, enemy submarines always appeared exactly where Japanese convoys were most vulnerable. The engine room telegraph jangled as Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Tanaka increased engine speed to 18 knots. The Tamamaru's reciprocating steam engines produced 4,000 horsepower, enough to outrun surfaced submarines but useless against submerged attacks. Fujimori knew that American submarines could maintain 16 knots underwater, using electric motors charged by diesel generators. Radio reports from other Japanese merchant captains painted an increasingly grim picture. The Americans had sunk the Kongo Maru near Formosa, the Osaka Maru off Hainan Island, and the Hiroshima Maru in the Luzon Strait. Each lost vessel represented irreplaceable cargo and experienced crews that Japan could not replace. Fujimori calculated the broader implications. Japan imported 88% of its petroleum, 73% of its iron ore, and 67% of its coal. Every successful American submarine attack reduced Japan's ability to manufacture aircraft, ammunition, and fuel for the Imperial Navy. The Tamamaru's cargo manifest revealed the desperation. Medical supplies that should have been abundant were now rationed. Ammunition loads had been reduced to preserve steel for aircraft production. Even rice shipments were smaller because Japanese merchant vessels could no longer safely transport food from Southeast Asian colonies. As evening approached, Fujimori watched another destroyer escort join the convoy. The IJN Yukikaze carried 120 depth charges and 8 anti-aircraft guns, but these weapons provided little protection against submarines that attacked from beyond visual range. Fujimori understood the mathematics of attrition. American submarines were sinking Japanese merchant vessels faster than shipyards could replace them. By December 1943, Japan had lost over 1 million tons of merchant shipping, reducing the available cargo capacity by 35%. Admiral Chester Nimitz spread the intelligence reports across his desk at Pearl Harbor headquarters, studying columns of numbers that told the story of America's underwater campaign against Japan. The statistics revealed a pattern of systematic destruction that exceeded even his most optimistic projections. Submarine warfare results for November 1943, reported Captain Richard Vosges, Chief of Submarine Operations. 37 Japanese vessels sunk, totaling 253,000 tons. Current monthly average exceeds our target projections by 47%. Nimitz examined the detailed reports from individual submarine patrols. The USS Wahoo had sunk 9 Japanese vessels in the Sea of Japan. The USS Silversides destroyed a 6-ship convoy near Truk. The USS Tamber eliminated 2 tankers carrying aviation fuel to Japanese air bases. In the Marshall Islands, the strategic implications impressed him more than individual tactical victories. American submarines were systematically severing Japan's maritime supply lines, forcing the enemy to divert increasingly scarce resources to convoy protection. Japanese destroyer construction had shifted from offensive operations to defensive escort duty. Nimitz studied a wall map showing submarine patrol areas throughout the Pacific. Red pins marked confirmed kills, creating a pattern that stretched from the Aleutian Islands to the Java Sea. American submarines now operated within 50 miles of Japanese home islands, attacking coastal shipping that had never before faced enemy action. Production reports from Electric Boat Company and Mare Island, continued Captain Vosges. 12 new submarines commissioned in November, bringing total Pacific Fleet strength to 187 operational boats. Monthly torpedo production exceeds 8,000 units. The numbers revealed American industrial superiority in stark detail. Electric Boat Company's shipyard in Groton, Connecticut, delivered 1 new submarine every 18 days. Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California launched 2 submarines monthly. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard contributed another submarine every 3 weeks. Nimitz calculated the cumulative effect. American shipyards would deliver 72 new submarines in 1944, each one capable of carrying 24 torpedoes on extended patrol. These vessels represented $4 billion in construction costs and employed 120,000 workers in 47 states. Intelligence reports included Japanese radio intercepts that confirmed the enemy's growing desperation. Japanese naval commanders were requesting additional destroyer escorts for merchant convoys. Imperial General Headquarters had issued directives reducing cargo loads to increase vessel speed. Most tellingly, Japan had begun rationing steel for civilian construction to preserve materials for military shipbuilding. Admiral Nimitz reviewed casualty reports that demonstrated American tactical superiority. Submarine crews achieved a 93% survival rate despite operating in enemy-controlled waters. Japanese anti-submarine warfare capabilities remained inadequate against American technological advantages in sonar, radar, and torpedo design. The strategic planning map showed projected operations for 1944. American submarines would expand patrols into the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and coastal waters around Japan itself. This escalation would complete the maritime blockade that Japanese leaders had never anticipated. Nimitz understood that submarine warfare was reshaping the entire Pacific conflict. Instead of decisive fleet battles that Japanese admirals expected, America was winning through industrial attrition and technological superiority. The USS Harder cruised at periscope depth through the Luzon Strait, hunting for the Japanese convoy that intelligence reports had located, heading toward Manila. Lieutenant Commander Dealey studied the sonar readings while his crew prepared for what would become their most successful single engagement of the war. Multiple contacts bearing 090 degrees, reported sonarman Palmer, adjusting his equipment to isolate individual vessel signatures. Count 6 merchantmen with 4 destroyer escorts range 3,000 yards. Dealey raised the periscope for visual confirmation. Through the lens, he could see the Japanese convoy arranged in defensive formation, cargo vessels in the center, destroyers positioned on the flanks and forward positions. The largest target appeared to be a 10,000-ton transport loaded with trucks and artillery for Japanese forces in the Philippines. The Harder's crew moved through attack procedures with practiced efficiency. Torpedoman Martinez flooded tubes 1 through 6, while our electrician's mate second-class David Park monitored battery levels for the high-speed maneuvers that would follow torpedo launch. Set depth 12 feet, speed high, ordered Dealey, programming the first torpedo for a surface runner that would strike the transport amidships. The Mark 14th torpedo carried enough explosive power to break the vessel's back, sending her to the bottom in minutes. The attack began at 08:47 hours. Dealey fired 6 torpedoes in rapid sequence, each one aimed at a different target within the convoy. The Harder's compressed air system cycled continuously, expelling torpedoes every 15 seconds, while the submarine maintained perfect trim at 65 feet depth. Torpedo number 1 struck the transport Aden Maru precisely where Dealey had aimed. The explosion lifted the vessel's bow section 20 feet above the waterline before the ship broke in half and sank in less than 4 minutes. 800 Japanese soldiers and 12 tanks disappeared beneath the South China Sea. Torpedoes 2 and 3 hit a cargo vessel carrying aviation fuel for Japanese fighter squadrons. The resulting explosion created a fireball that rose 300 feet above the ocean surface, visible from 15 miles away. The blast was so violent that it damaged the bridge windows of nearby Japanese destroyers. The 4th torpedo found the ammunition ship Kyoto Maru, triggering a secondary explosion that scattered steel fragments across 2 square miles of ocean. The ship's cargo of artillery shells detonated simultaneously, creating shock waves that registered on seismographic equipment in Luzon and Formosa. All targets destroyed, reported Palmer, his sonar equipment tracking the sounds of sinking vessels and exploding ammunition. 4 ships confirmed sunk, estimated tonnage 36,000 tons. The Japanese destroyer escorts launched counterattacks that continued for 6 hours. The IJN Shikanami dropped 87 depth charges, while the IJN Yukikaze conducted sonar sweeps in expanding search patterns. But the Harder had already withdrawn to deeper water, using her superior underwater speed to escape retaliation. Chief Sullivan calculated the strategic impact. The attack had eliminated enough military supplies to equip 2 Japanese infantry divisions. The lost aviation fuel would have supported fighter operations for 6 weeks. Most importantly, the sunken transport carried specialized radio equipment that Japanese forces desperately needed for coordinating defensive operations. The night shift at Willow Run plant hummed with unprecedented activity as Elizabeth Harris supervised the final assembly of B-24 Liberator bombers. But her thoughts remained focused on the submarine production lines at nearby Detroit Arsenal, where her previous experience with torpedo assembly had proven invaluable for training new workers. Production target exceeded again, reported Assistant Supervisor Margaret Chen, consulting her clipboard filled with hourly output statistics. 18 bombers completed this shift, bringing monthly total to 437 aircraft. Harris walked between the assembly stations, observing workers who had transformed from housewives and farmers into precision manufacturers in less than 6 months. The woman installing navigation equipment had previously operated a beauty salon. The man calibrating bombardier equipment had taught high school mathematics until Pearl Harbor changed everyone's priorities. The scale of American production defied comprehension. Willow Run plant alone employed 47,000 workers, producing one B-24 bomber every hour during peak operations. Ford Motor Company had converted automobile assembly lines to aircraft manufacturing, applying mass production techniques that Henry Ford had pioneered for civilian vehicles. Harris calculated the broader implications. American factories were producing 25,000 military aircraft annually compared to Japan's maximum output of 8,000 planes. This production advantage meant American losses could be replaced within weeks, while Japanese losses became permanent reductions in combat capability. The bomber production line stretched for 1 mile inside the factory building. Harris watched as another B-24 emerged from final assembly, its 4 Pratt & Whitney engines gleaming under fluorescent lights. This particular aircraft would join the 5th Air Force in the Philippines, providing air support for American ground forces advancing toward Japan. Statistical reports from Washington revealed the scope of American industrial mobilization. Aircraft factories employed over 2 million workers. Steel production exceeded 100 million tons annually. Rubber manufacturing, despite wartime shortages, supplied military needs while maintaining essential civilian transportation. Harris reviewed personnel records showing the demographic transformation of American manufacturing. Women comprised 37% of aircraft workers, compared to 11% before the war. African Americans had increased their factory employment by over 200%. These workers produced weapons that Japanese industry could never match in quantity or quality. The quality control station impressed Harris most. Every aircraft component underwent multiple inspections before installation. Engine testing required 4 hours of operation under full power. Electrical systems faced exhaustive checks that identified potential failures before aircraft reached combat zones. American manufacturing quality exceeded Japanese standards in measurable ways. American aircraft engines operated for 800 hours between overhauls, while Japanese engines required maintenance every 400 hours. American aluminum alloys provided superior strength-to-weight ratios. American electronics offered greater reliability under combat conditions. As dawn approached, Harris watched another completed bomber taxi toward the runway for delivery flight to California. The aircraft represented 12,000 hours of labor by 300 workers using materials from 38 states. Within 3 weeks, this bomber would attack Japanese positions in the Marshall Islands. The production statistics told their own story of American victory. 25 bombers completed daily at Willow Run, 43 fighters from North American Aviation, 18 transports from Douglas Aircraft. Japan could not replace losses at 1/10 this rate. The USS Harders. War Patrol in October 1944 began with intelligence reports indicating massive Japanese convoy movements through the Philippine Sea. Lieutenant Commander Dealey studied the tactical situation while his crew prepared for what would become their final and most devastating series of attacks. Priority target identified, reported Communication Officer Lieutenant Thomas Morton, decoding the encrypted message from Pacific Fleet Headquarters. Japanese task force, including battleship and heavy cruisers escorting supply convoy to Leyte Gulf. Dealey understood the strategic significance. American forces had landed on Leyte, establishing a beachhead that threatened Japan's entire Southeast Asian empire. The Japanese convoy carried reinforcements and supplies critical for defending the Philippines against MacArthur's advancing army. The Harder positioned herself along the convoy's projected route, using updated intelligence about Japanese navigation patterns. American codebreakers had penetrated Japanese naval communications, providing submarine commanders with detailed information about enemy movements and intentions. Sonarman Palmer detected the convoy at 04:23 hours, reporting multiple large contacts approaching from the southwest. Through his periscope, Dealey could see the Japanese formation, 3 battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, and 12 destroyers escorting 27 transport vessels loaded with troops and equipment. The attack required perfect timing and coordination. Dealey maneuvered the Harder to intercept the convoy's lead elements while maintaining enough distance to avoid detection by Japanese sonar equipment. The submarine's electric motors provided silent running capability that Japanese destroyers could not detect. "Fire 1 through 6, ordered Dealey, launching a full spread of torpedoes toward the convoy's center. Each torpedo carried enough explosive power to sink a cruiser, and the Harder's improved Mark XIV weapons had corrected the reliability problems that plagued earlier models. The first torpedo struck the battleship Congo amidships, flooding 2 engine rooms and reducing her speed to 8 knots. The second torpedo hit the heavy cruiser Otago, triggering magazine explosions that sank the vessel in 11 minutes. Torpedoes 3 and 4 destroyed 2 transport ships carrying Japanese infantry and artillery. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Japanese destroyers immediately launched counterattacks, dropping depth charges and patterns designed to bracket the Harder's probable position. But Dealey had already ordered emergency dive procedures, taking the submarine to 350 feet while using underwater speed to escape the destroyer screen. Chief Sullivan tracked the battle's progress through sonar contacts and explosion sounds. The Japanese convoy had lost 4 major vessels within 15 minutes, eliminating over 20,000 tons of shipping and reducing troop transport capacity by 30%. The Harder surfaced 6 hours later to assess damage and reload torpedo tubes for additional attacks. Radio communications with Pearl Harbor confirmed that this engagement represented the most successful single submarine attack of the Pacific War. Torpedo Man Martinez supervised the complex process of loading new Mark XIV torpedoes from the submarine's forward magazine. Each weapon weighed over 3,000 pounds and required careful handling to maintain the precision alignment necessary for accurate firing. The statistical impact exceeded tactical considerations. This single attack had sunk enough Japanese shipping to reduce cargo capacity between Japan and the Philippines by 15%. The lost battleship and cruiser represented irreplaceable naval assets that Japan could not replace given current production limitations. Captain Fujimori watched from the bridge of the Tama Maru as the remnants of his convoy struggled toward Manila Bay. Of the original 12 merchant vessels that had departed Yokohama, only 4 remained operational. American submarines had systematically destroyed Japan's ability to maintain supply lines to the Philippines. Radio contact with Harbor Master, reported Communication Officer Lieutenant Yamamoto, his voice reflecting the exhaustion that had become endemic among Japanese merchant crews. Docking assignment delayed due to damaged port facilities from American air raids. The Tama Maru's cargo manifest revealed the desperation of Japan's situation. Instead of rice and ammunition, the ship now carried medical supplies scavenged from civilian hospitals and replacement equipment cannibalized from damaged aircraft. Everything useful had been requisitioned for military purposes. Fujimori studied intelligence reports describing American submarine capabilities that seemed to improve with each encounter. Enemy vessels now carried improved radar systems that detected Japanese ships beyond visual range. American torpedoes had become more reliable and carried larger warheads. Most troubling, American submarines operated in coordinated groups that attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. The port of Manila showed clear evidence of America's industrial superiority. Japanese defenders had constructed coastal fortifications using concrete and steel, but American bombing raids had reduced these positions to rubble within weeks. Japanese aircraft, once masters of the Pacific skies, had been overwhelmed by American fighters and bombers produced in quantities that Japanese industry could never match. Harbor master records indicated the scale of shipping losses. In September 1944, American submarines had sunk 43 Japanese merchant vessels, totaling over 300,000 tons. October losses exceeded 50 vessels. November projections suggested complete collapse of cargo transport between Japan and Southeast Asian territories. Fujimori calculated the cumulative effect on Japanese military operations. Fuel shortages had grounded most aircraft except for emergency missions. Ammunition rationing limited artillery support for infantry units. Food supplies had been reduced to subsistence levels that weakened soldier effectiveness. The broader strategic picture revealed Japan's inability to sustain prolonged warfare against American industrial capacity. While Japanese factories struggled to produce replacement aircraft and vehicles, American manufacturing had achieved production levels that exceeded Japanese planners' most pessimistic estimates. Japanese naval intelligence had finally acknowledged American submarine production statistics that they had previously dismissed as propaganda. The United States was launching 2 submarines weekly, while Japan managed 1 submarine monthly. American torpedo production exceeded Japanese output by 10-to-1 ratios. Coastal defense preparations reflected Japan's recognition that the war had turned decisively against them. Artillery positions faced seaward, anticipating American invasion rather than supporting offensive operations. Aircraft had been withdrawn from forward bases to defend the home islands. As the Tamamaru approached her berth, Fujimori reflected on the broader implications of America's submarine campaign. Japanese merchant marine casualties exceeded 40%, with experienced captains and crews lost at rates that could not be replaced. Training programs for new personnel required time that Japan no longer possessed. The statistical reality was undeniable. American submarines had achieved their strategic objective of severing Japan's maritime supply lines, reducing cargo capacity below the minimum required for military operations. Admiral Nimitz reviewed the comprehensive submarine warfare statistics in his Pearl Harbor office, studying reports that documented the complete success of America's underwater campaign against Japanese shipping. The numbers revealed systematic destruction that exceeded all strategic projections. Final quarterly assessment, reported Captain Vosges, presenting charts that tracked submarine achievements from December 1941 through September 1944. Total Japanese merchant tonnage sunk 5,200,000 tons. Percentage of pre-war fleet destroyed 78%. Nimitz examined detailed breakdowns showing the progression of American submarine effectiveness. Early war patrols had achieved modest success due to torpedo defects and limited tactical experience. By 1943, submarine crews were sinking enemy vessels at unprecedented rates. Current operations in 1944 had virtually eliminated Japanese cargo transport capability. The strategic planning map displayed American submarine patrol areas that now encompassed every major Japanese shipping route. Red pins marked confirmed kills from the Aleutian Islands to the Java Sea, creating a pattern of destruction that had isolated Japan from its conquered territories. Statistical analysis revealed the campaign's decisive impact on Japanese war production. Steel imports had fallen by 87%, forcing Japan to cannibalize civilian infrastructure for military purposes. Petroleum imports had decreased by 92%, grounding most aircraft and reducing naval operations to minimum levels. American submarine production statistics demonstrated industrial superiority that Japanese planners had never anticipated. Electric Boat Company had delivered 137 submarines since Pearl Harbor. Mare Island Naval Shipyard contributed another 89 vessels. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard added 67 submarines to the Pacific Fleet. Quality improvements had accompanied quantity increases. The latest Gatto-class submarines carried 24 improved Mark I torpedoes with reliability rates exceeding 95%. Radar systems provided surface detection beyond visual range. Sonar equipment identified enemy vessels at distances that allowed submarines to position for optimal attacks. Crew effectiveness had reached unprecedented levels through combat experience and improved training programs. Submarine commanders averaged 11 successful attacks per patrol. Torpedo accuracy exceeded 80% under optimal conditions. Submarine survival rates remained above 90% despite operating in heavily defended enemy waters. Intelligence reports from Japanese sources confirmed the enemy's growing desperation. Imperial General Headquarters had issued directives redistributing destroyer escorts from offensive operations to convoy protection duty. Civilian shipping had been requisitioned for military transport, disrupting Japanese domestic economy. The broader Pacific strategy reflected submarine warfare's central importance. MacArthur's Philippines campaign succeeded, partly because Japanese defenders lacked ammunition and fuel that submarines had prevented from reaching the islands. Nimitz's Central Pacific operations faced reduced opposition because Japanese aircraft could not be supplied with adequate fuel and replacement parts. Manufacturing capacity comparisons revealed the scope of American advantage. United States shipyards could replace submarine losses within 3 months of construction start. Japanese shipyards required 18 months to build comparable vessels and lacked steel allocation for submarine construction given competing military priorities. Nimitz understood that submarine warfare had achieved strategic objectives that traditional naval battles could never accomplish. American submarines had severed Japan's maritime lifeline, forcing the enemy into defensive positions that could not be sustained. The final war patrol of the USS Harder began on January 15, 1945, as Lieutenant Commander Dealey received orders to proceed to Japanese coastal waters for attacks against the enemy's remaining merchant vessels. The submarine's crew understood they were participating in the concluding phase of a campaign that had systematically destroyed Japan's ability to wage war. Intelligence. Summary indicates minimal Japanese shipping activity. Reported communication. Officer Lieutenant Morton, reviewing classified reports from Pacific Fleet Headquarters. Enemy cargo capacity reduced to less than 1 million tons total, compared to 6 million tons pre-war. Dealey studied navigational charts showing the approaches to Tokyo Bay, where American submarines now operated within sight of Japan's home islands. The strategic situation had reversed completely since December 1941. Japanese coastal defenses faced inward, anticipating invasion rather than supporting offensive operations. The crew prepared for what would be their most dangerous patrol. Japanese waters contained extensive minefields, coastal artillery positions, and aircraft patrols concentrated around vital installations. But these defenses protected targets of diminishing strategic value as Japan's industrial capacity approached complete collapse. Sonarman Palmer detected the first target at 6:47 hours, a small coastal freighter attempting to transport coal between Japanese ports. The vessel displaced only 2,000 tons, but represented the type of marginal shipping that Japan had been forced to employ as larger vessels fell victim to submarine attacks. "Fire 1, ordered Dealey, launching a single torpedo toward the freighter. The Mark 13th weapon struck amidships, sinking the vessel in less than 3 minutes. The attack eliminated coal supplies that would have powered Japanese factories for 1 week. The Harder continued patrol operations for 18 days, encountering increasingly desperate Japanese shipping. Merchant vessels now traveled individually rather than in convoys, attempting to avoid detection through random routing and nighttime movement. These tactics proved ineffective against American submarine capabilities. Statistical summaries revealed the comprehensive success of the submarine campaign. American submarines had sunk over 5 million tons of Japanese merchant shipping, reducing cargo capacity below the minimum required for military operations. Japan could no longer transport petroleum, steel, or food between home islands and occupied territories. Crew morale remained high despite the obvious conclusion of effective resistance. Torpedo man Martinez supervised the final torpedo loading procedures, knowing that each remaining weapon would contribute to Japan's inevitable surrender. Chief Sullivan maintained detailed logs documenting the submarine's contribution to American victory. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate military considerations. Japan's merchant marine had been reduced to coastal fishing vessels and small cargo ships incapable of supporting large-scale military operations. Industrial production had fallen to 20% of the pre-war levels due to material shortages caused by submarine interdiction. Radio communications, intercepted by American intelligence, revealed Japanese recognition of their hopeless situation. Imperial Navy headquarters had ceased planning offensive operations, concentrating remaining resources on homeland defense against anticipated invasion. The Harder's final engagement occurred on February 3, 1945, when the submarine encountered a Japanese destroyer attempting to escort medical supplies to isolated garrisons. The attack sank both vessels, eliminating the last organized Japanese shipping in the patrol area. As the submarine returned to Pearl Harbor, Dealey reflected on the campaign's historical significance. American submarines had achieved decisive victory through systematic destruction of enemy logistics, proving that industrial capacity and technological superiority could overcome traditional military advantages. The war's end found Elizabeth Harris supervising the conversion of military production lines back to civilian manufacturing at the Willow Run plant. The transition symbolized America's emergence as the world's dominant industrial power, equipped with manufacturing capabilities that had proven decisive in achieving victory over the Axis powers. Final production statistics, reported Assistant Supervisor Margaret Chen, reviewing the comprehensive records of wartime manufacturing. Total aircraft produced at Willow Run, 18,437 bombers. Peak monthly output, 491 aircraft. Harris walked through the factory floor where workers dismantled bomber assembly stations and installed equipment for automobile production. The same precision manufacturing techniques that had produced military aircraft would now create civilian vehicles for a prosperous peacetime. Economy. The demographic transformation remained visible throughout American industry. Women comprised 42% of aircraft workers compared to 11% before Pearl Harbor. African American employment in manufacturing had doubled. These workers had demonstrated capabilities that permanently changed American labor patterns. Statistical analyses revealed the scope of American industrial achievement during the war. United States factories had produced 300,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and 8,000 naval vessels. This output exceeded the combined production of Germany, Japan, and Italy by factors that enemy planners had considered impossible. Submarine production statistics demonstrated American technological and manufacturing superiority. Electric Boat Company had delivered 211 submarines during the war years. Mare Island Naval Shipyard contributed 156 vessels. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard added 123 submarines to the fleet. Quality improvements had accompanied quantity increases throughout the production cycle. Later submarines carried improved radar systems, better torpedo loading, mechanisms, and enhanced crew comfort features that increased operational effectiveness. American industrial capacity had achieved both mass production and technological advancement simultaneously. Harris reviewed personnel records showing the human cost of industrial mobilization. Factory workers had maintained production schedules despite rationing, extended hours, and family separations. Their efforts had created the weapons and equipment that enabled American military forces to achieve decisive victory. The economic implications extended beyond immediate military considerations. American manufacturing capacity had expanded to levels that positioned the United States as the world's leading industrial nation. Steel production, aircraft manufacturing, and shipbuilding capabilities would support peacetime prosperity and international leadership. International comparisons revealed the decisive nature of American industrial superiority. United States aircraft. Production had exceeded Japanese output by 4-to-1 ratios. American steel production surpassed German capacity by 3-to-1 margins. These advantages had translated directly into battlefield success. Training programs developed during wartime would continue supporting American technological advancement. Workers who had learned precision manufacturing techniques for military production could apply these skills to civilian products. Industrial research and development capabilities had advanced by decades within 4 years. As Harris watched the final B-24 bomber leave the assembly line, she understood that her generation had participated in unprecedented industrial achievement. American factories had produced the weapons that defeated totalitarian enemies while transforming the United States into a global superpower. The legacy extended beyond statistical measurements. American workers had demonstrated that democratic societies could outproduce authoritarian regimes when properly motivated and organized. Industrial capacity had proven as decisive as military strategy in determining the war's outcome. The post-war assessment of American submarine warfare revealed strategic achievements that had fundamentally altered global power relationships. Captain Fujimori, now serving with Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force during Reconstruction, reflected on the campaign that had systematically destroyed his nation's ability to wage war across the Pacific. Merchant marine losses exceeded all projections, Fujimori reported to Allied occupation authorities conducting historical analysis of Japanese shipping casualties. Total vessels sunk, 2,714 ships. Tonnage lost, 5,300,000 tons. The statistical record documented unprecedented destruction achieved through technological superiority and industrial capacity. American submarines had eliminated 78% of Japan's pre-war merchant fleet while maintaining operational effectiveness that Japanese anti-submarine warfare could never counter. Japanese naval records revealed the broader strategic impact of submarine interdiction. Steel imports had fallen from 5 million tons annually to less than 200,000 tons by 1945. Petroleum imports decreased from 43 million barrels to fewer than 1 million barrels. Coal shipments dropped by 87%. Industrial production statistics showed the cascading effects of maritime isolation. Aircraft manufacturing had declined to 18% of peak wartime output. Artillery production fell to 12% of 1942 levels. Naval construction ceased entirely as steel allocation shifted to defensive preparations. The human cost reflected the broader tragedy of Japan's strategic miscalculation. Merchant marine casualties exceeded 100,000 sailors, officers, and passengers. Civilian deaths from starvation and disease increased dramatically as food imports declined. Military effectiveness deteriorated as ammunition and fuel supplies disappeared. Admiral Nimitz's post-war analysis confirmed that submarine warfare had achieved decisive strategic objectives without requiring the massive casualties associated with traditional naval battles. American submarine crews had eliminated Japan's capacity for sustained military operations while maintaining combat effectiveness throughout the campaign. Technological comparisons revealed the scope of American advantages that Japanese planners had underestimated. American submarines operated at depths that Japanese depth charges could not reach. American torpedoes achieved reliability rates that Japanese weapons never matched. American radar systems detected targets beyond Japanese visual range, the Pacific. Fleet's submarine force had grown from 51 operational boats in December 1941 to over 200 vessels by 1945. This expansion reflected American industrial capacity that could simultaneously support massive ground operations while maintaining submarine operations across thousands of miles of ocean. Manufacturing statistics demonstrated the decisive nature of American productive superiority. United States shipyards had built submarines faster than Japanese forces could sink them. American torpedo production exceeded Japanese requirements by ratios that enabled sustained operations throughout the Pacific theater. Quality control systems had ensured that American submarines maintained operational effectiveness despite extended patrols in hostile waters. Crew survival rates exceeded 90% even when operating near Japanese home islands. Equipment reliability reduced maintenance requirements and extended patrol duration. The strategic legacy influenced post-war naval doctrine and international relationships. Submarine warfare had proven that industrial capacity and technological advancement could achieve decisive victory without requiring massive surface fleet engagements. American maritime supremacy had been established through systematic destruction of enemy logistics. Historical analysis confirmed that submarine operations represented one of the most successful military campaigns in recorded history. American submarines had achieved strategic objectives while operating with minimal losses and maximum effectiveness across the world's largest ocean. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.